Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap-up for August 8th, 2014. Just about every story I have, again, this week could have been the lead story, but I'm going to lead with the Ukraine crisis. Remember I told you, a week or so ago, a few weeks ago, that no matter who shot this Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 out of the sky, it really doesn't make any difference. I mean, they've already, and I'll tell you why in a second, they've already stopped the investigation. It's too dangerous. The fighting is too severe around the crash site. They're shooting close to, really close to, and I think they're trying to do that to scare them off. The investigators, they've shut down the investigation. They haven't found all the bodies. They don't have any investigation, a complete investigation. But as I said, it doesn't make any difference because I think that in that region, we are headed for war, no matter who shot the plane down. I know that there's a lot of theories on that the U.S. and the Ukrainians shot it down, that the Ukrainian fighter shot it down, that the Russians shot it down, that the separatists shot it down. It doesn't make any difference. We're headed for war. And the financial war is in full bloom. Russia has now fired back with the sanctions that the U.S. and EU put on Russia, and now Russia has fired back, and they're going to stop importing all kinds of different foods and meats from the EU and the U.S. The U.S. is getting hit with, poultry, chickens. Apparently, it's the second biggest importer of U.S. Chickens, poultry. But that's not going to really hurt the U.S. all that much because it's not a lot, $1.3 billion, a lot of money, but it's not going to hurt the U.S. all that much. You're going to see chicken prices here in the U.S. go down because there's going to be a flood of chickens. And then I think you're going to see it right back up as these producers are going to take a hit. Some people aren't going to be able to make it, some farmers. Or they're going to cut way back on production, and then you're going to see the price go up. But let's focus on the European Union, and this is why I think that Russia did this. By far, the biggest amount of agricultural trade with Russia is from the European Union. And listen, the pig countries, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Spain, Greece, they're all doing terrible. Italy is a basket case financially. France is not doing well. Even Germany has been buckling under the light sanctions so far that they've had, with Russia, and this is going to hurt an already very weak European economy. And again, agricultural trade between the EU and Russia is pretty big. It's the biggest. That's the biggest single block of nations that trade agriculturally with Russia. So this is going to hurt the EU, and I think that is the point. Vladimir Putin is saying, okay, listen, my people can take it. We're tough, and we've suffered before. I mean, we lost 20 million people in World War II. Can you imagine that? It's like playing a basketball game and scoring 200 points and losing. The Germans killed 20 million people in Russia and lost. And I think they're going to hunker down, and they're going to say, fine, we will do without. And more importantly, that it's going to really hurt an already hurting European economy. And that, I think, is going to end up hurting NATO. And I think that's the point. Now, there's already 20,000 Russian troops, on the border, amassing on the border. Are they going to invade? Maybe. The Ukrainian army is, whacking the pro-Russian separatists pretty hard. Is Putin going to intervene? Maybe. Or might he just wait until winter? Or this fall, when the EU, European nations there, which import a lot of Russian natural gas to heat their homes and businesses, maybe Russia might just wait until winter time and then start jacking up the prices of energy. Russia and Putin hold the ace of spades in energy. So, whether he invades, whether he waits till winter, you can bet natural gas prices are going to get jacked up. And they can't be replaced. There's not really an apparatus for America to send its extra natural gas from fracking over to Europe. It can't really be done. And so, I mean, all this infrastructure with pipelines and natural gas and places to, for it to go into the European Union, into Poland is a tremendous importer of natural gas. Germany also uses a significant amount of Russian natural gas, as does France, Spain. Everybody in the EU on the mainland uses a lot of Russian natural gas. And then, of course, we have the deals that we have with the United States with Boeing. And, we're supposed to be delivering them some jet aircraft in, 2017 or so. That hasn't been kiboshed yet. So the trade war is nasty. And trade wars and financial wars usually end up in metal-to-metal contact. And we definitely have a trade and financial war going on. And can a real war be far behind? Keep your eye on the Ukraine crisis with Russia, the U.S., and EU. It is nasty, and there's no sign of it letting up anytime soon. The U.S. has started humanitarian aid and has also announced that it will be bombing ISIS, ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or the Islamic State. They control a large swath of eastern Syria and western Iraq, about a third of Syria, about a third of Iraq. They've been on a terror for more than a year. Iraq, I've been telling you this, asked months ago for the Obama administration to do bombing runs while ISIS was out in the desert in western Iraq. Wouldn't do it. They've overrun towns. They've killed tens of thousands of Christians and thousands of Muslims. They have beheaded people. They have shot people. I've seen it on YouTube. They love to show their gruesome crimes on YouTube. There have been crucifixions, especially for Christians. It's thousands and thousands of people that have been murdered by ISIS. You haven't heard very much from the UN about all this. And now there are 40,000 Christians and others trapped on top of a mountain in northern Iraq. They say it's the same mountain where the allegedly Noah's Ark was found. But anyway, 40,000 people. This is going to be a genocide. They've dropped, humanitarian aid. They don't have any water. They don't have any food. They just ran for their lives. And now the Obama administration says, well, we're going to start, bombing key areas, bombing as needed. ISIS, is that enough to stop ISIS? No, probably not. Is the United States going to get back into Iraq? Well, yes, probably so. At least flying air power, air support, air cover. I don't think there's any stomach for Obama to stick troops back in the ground there. But who's going to go in there? I mean, who's going to put troops? Saudi Arabia and their princes? Jordan has their work cut out. They'll be lucky if they're still a country in 2 years. Iraq is a basket case. They've got the Soviets and the Iranians helping them in Baghdad. They're only 60 miles, ISIS, only 60 miles from Baghdad. What a colossal mess. But ISIS is not just a few terrorists. It's thousands and thousands of terrorists. It's a terror army. They're well funded. They're well equipped. They have ammunition. They have money. It's, and again, this is part of this group was from Syria. When I've been telling you we were helping the Syrian rebels, which is Al-Qaeda, and this is an offshoot of Al-Qaeda that makes Al-Qaeda look like Boy Scouts. I mean, ISIS, they're executing Al-Qaeda members that aren't radical enough. They're executing moderate Al-Qaeda members. And this is how crazy they are. And I think one of their big goals, one of the things they're looking at, I think, when they get strong enough, isn't Jordan or isn't going into Baghdad, although Baghdad could fall. I think they want to go straight down into Saudi Arabia and knock out Mecca and really throw the world oil supply into a tizzy. And they're probably powerful enough to do that. Saudi Arabia is not that strong of a power, even though a year or so ago they bought $60 billion worth of military hardware, including tanks and jets and, you name it. But that's still not a very strong militarily, not a very strong country. So ISIS, that's a big, big problem. And it is not going away anytime soon. Next up, the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. In Gaza is officially over. Before the ceasefire ended, a few rockets were fired from Gaza, according to the Israelis, from Gaza into Israel. But a lot of Palestinians want to see this truce continue. They're still trying to work out a truce in Egypt. But listen, both sides have dug themselves in, and they say that they're not going to yield. I mean, Hamas says, we want our borders opened. They say they have what they have is an open air prison. We want our borders open. We want our shipping lanes open, our seaports open. We want some of our prisoners back. That's what Hamas wants. The Israelis say, hey, these terror tunnels you've had, you can't start rebuilding them. Supposedly, the Israeli Defense Forces destroyed nearly 40 tunnels. Some of them were more than a mile long, and they went from Gaza into Israel, and they're terror tunnels. They were used to attack, and were used to attack Israeli citizens, according to Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis. Also, according to Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis, 3,500 rockets were fired from Gaza into Israel. Now, they had the Iron Dome, and a lot of them didn't, hit, the intended targets, which is Israeli civilians, and that cut down their casualties dramatically. But, listen, firing rockets into another country, we have 3,500. This isn't a prank. This is an act of war. Tunneling into another country to commit terror acts is an act of war. Now, the Palestinians say the Israelis intentionally targeted civilians, and there was a lot of loss of life in Gaza. I mean, nearly 1,900 casualties. A lot of them are women and children. And again, the folks in Gaza, Hamas says the Israelis intentionally targeted civilians. The Israelis say they did not intentionally target civilians, and that Hamas was firing rockets in heavily populated civilian areas, and they intentionally fired rockets from places like schools and hospitals. Benjamin Netanyahu had a press conference this week, and he rolled out video where they were shooting rockets from schools and residential areas. That's why they say the casualty count was high. And, I had Gerald Celente on not long ago, and he said, well, Gaza's so small that, they have to fire rockets from civilian areas. No, they don't. Listen, if they were worried about a loss of civilian life, they'd move their military hardware to the outskirts of town. They'd move their military hardware to the front lines and take on the IDF, but they don't do that. So even if they don't intentionally shoot rockets from, schools and hospitals, they are certainly shooting rockets from, highly populated areas in Gaza. And, even President Obama, who, listen, the relations between Israel and Obama, publicly they say everything's fine, they're allies, but listen, there's been a lot of friction between Israel and the United States. That's for sure, with Kerry and Obama and the phone call leak between Netanyahu and Obama that wasn't very hospitable. It was almost like an argument. But even Obama came out this week and said he had no sympathy for Hamas. None. He had a lot of sympathy for the Palestinian people in Gaza, and I do too. I mean, these people have been suffering. They had their power knocked out. They've had their, hospitals damaged. They've had, the sewer system damaged, their water system damaged. Yes, I have a lot of sympathy for the people in Gaza. But even Obama came out and said that it was irresponsible for them to be firing, rockets from these highly populated civilian areas. Schools, hospitals, residential areas, and that Israel had a right to defend itself. That's what President Obama said. So, listen, the Israelis don't want to open the border because they don't want Hamas to rearm and reload, and the Israelis say, hey, listen, if you want us to open your borders, and not have this blockade, you have to disarm. Well, Hamas says, no, our finger's on the trigger. We're not going to disarm. We don't want to give up our rockets, but we want you to open our borders anyway. So I don't know how long the ceasefire has officially ended, and I don't know if they're going to have another one and how much bloodshed there's going to be. It's on again, off again, on again, off again. But there is no peace plan whatsoever. They can't hardly even hold a truce for more than, 3 days. I mean, even at the end of this truce, as I said, a couple of rockets got fired out of Gaza into Israel. So it's a nasty situation, and there is no real conclusion to any of this, at least for the foreseeable future. And my heart goes out to both sides. I feel terrible for the folks in Gaza. And, the people in Israel are also ducking all these missiles and running into shelters. So a nasty situation on both sides. Lots of sin to go around on both sides. I hope it gets resolved peacefully. I mean, everybody deserves to live in peace. Next up, this little story here, which is, here we are again. This is this border problem down on the southern border of the United States with Mexico. Schools brace for up to 50,000 migrants. Note, migrants. Not illegal immigrants, USA Today here. This is USA Today. Migrants, 50,000. Well, I've heard one commentator say that, this was going to cost schools across America, $1 billion a year, each and every year. You know how strapped everybody's school systems seem. We have news all the time about school cutbacks, about, teachers having a hard time getting a raise, and all of a sudden, boom, we get, 50,000 kids dumped in our school system. Of course, the USA migrants. Oh, it's a humanitarian. No, it was contrived. Dinesh D'Souza was on this week. The top best-selling author and a hit documentary movie maker. And he says, this is an Alinsky's, Saul Alinsky type plan where they, flood the system, prey on the goodness of the American middle class, and try to destabilize the system. Well, isn't this destabilizing? A lot of people are upset about this, and that's what brings me to my next little tidbit of information, and that is that there's a brand new poll out. I think it's a Reuters poll, a brand new poll out, and it says 70% of Americans, and we're talking both Democrats and Republicans, 70% say that illegal immigration is a threat to the economy and our culture. Now, try to get 70% of Americans to agree on anything, and they agree on that subject. And this brings me to my reoccurring question: how is all this illegal immigration being shoved down America's throat? How is this good for the Democrats in the midterm elections? Do they think there's not going to be an election this November? Maybe that's what they're thinking. This is a loser for Democrats, and people are upset, and both Democrats and Republicans are upset. Higher amount of Republicans, but that the independents are upset, and that's the group of people that every party wants to get, the middle, the 40% of the middle, the independents. How is this a winning issue for the Democrats? Maybe they're thinking about 2016, and all these people they let in are going to be voters. I don't know. But it's a mess. And finally, my reoccurring pet peeve, and I miss some of these things. There's so many settlements for fraud from the big banks. But, Eric Holder, no banker is too big to jail. Really? Name me one big banker who's been jailed. Time's up. None. Okay, so here we have the latest settlement, Bank of America. You should hear Charlie Gasparino on talking about this. Apologist for the bankers. It's the people's fault. They were greedy and got these mortgages. $17 billion, what is near a record. I think this is a done deal. It says it is, but I think it's a done deal. $17 billion. $9 billion of it goes, check to the Justice Department. They're getting a piece of the action for the fraud. This is a fraud settlement. $8 billion to, help out consumers. Of course, that's always nebulous. $8 billion. We're going to give $8 billion to, really, who's going to keep track of that? Loan forgiveness and better deals on interest rates and $8 billion. Really? Yeah, that's nefarious. But $9 billion gets written out to the Treasury Department. And again, not a single banker goes to jail. And this is for their mortgage fraud. That's what the USA Today said. It's let's get right here. It's what is it? A record? Yeah, record fraud fine right here. Right here, fraud fine. Record fraud fine. So it's not. I'm just not saying that. It's the fraud fine record fraud. And again, they sold liar loans. Let me explain it to you simply. They sold liar loans. They packaged liar loans into securities. They said, hey, this is a little bit of bad debt and a lot of good debt. No. I think Max Kaiser said, it's like having a diamond in a bucket of glass and taking that one diamond and throwing it into a bucket of glass and saying, that whole bucket's a bucket of diamonds. That's a great thing. Max Kaiser, It was one of his sayings, and I give him full credit for it. But again, not a single banker. They sold liar loans. They packaged them into securities. They rated them AAA when indeed they weren't. They ended up calling them toxic, but they don't say that anymore. They're legacy assets. And now the Fed is still, to this day, still buying them back, this junk and fraud, from the books of the bankers to the, billions of dollars each and every month. They're buying this stuff off their books. And not a single big banker has gone to jail. Unbelievable. Really, quite unbelievable. That's who is running the country. The bankers are running the country, and they're doing a bad job of it. And nobody in the mainstream media, nobody will stand up in a press conference. Nobody will stand up in a White House briefing room and say, hey, how come not a single big banker has gone to jail? I mean, Eric Holder has said no bank's too big to go to jail. How come not a single one, not a single criminal? The FBI doesn't know how to make a criminal case on rampant fraud. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you for your donations. Thank you for all your comments. The site lives and breathes, lives and dies on the comments. Go out and have a nice weekend. And remember, fear not.